Hjalmar stands on deck of his longship, one hand resting on the pommel of his expertly crafted swords and looking out over the ramshackle mess that is the mercenary city of decimation, reflects on the stupidity of his nickname. Lothhunt, they call him. Clean hands, though not within earshot and never among his own crew. And the thing that upsets him most about this is the utter insanity of considering this an insult. Among the northern raiders, to act civilized, regardless of your origin, is a sign of weakness, of softness. And while a good political backstabbing is something greatly approved by the scheming jarls of the northern peninsula, along the fjords of which the northern raiders put their settlements, there always has to be the panache of the barbaric that goes into it. A cutting of heads, a wiping out of families. Hiring assassins for coins or potent poisons from the Forbidden City is greatly frowned upon, which of course just means that Hjalmar has devised, in his lifetime now, going on over 20 years, a fair number of ways to just hide it better. Let the Jarls of the North turn to their soothsayers and their guts and entrail readers. Hjalmar's decision-making is built on better counsel, on more civilized ways. And as he looks over to the meditating, cross-legged form, bald-headed but for a long, intricately woven braid, sitting between the benches of the rowers on his longship, oblivious to the world and everything around it, he wonders not for the first time what he would do without this civilized counsel of his, this wisdom that will soon set the world to a better place. And as he reflects on the next steps to get him there, he ponders his own role in this coming new era and how he will make the North, at long last, more civilized. Hello friends, Anderson here. Welcome back to Oksana, Thief, Gladiator Queen, the Black Sword Hack solo campaign, where your viewership is much appreciated, as is the liking, commenting and subscribing and other such YouTubey things. Now, what was that opener about? That was something that I thought of between episodes, where I kind of reflected back on the overall situation of the world, this struggle, cosmic struggle between the forces of law and chaos, and the fact that the main threat for Doomed Alissar and our main driving antagonist for the campaign is supposed to be the Silent Council, these law-aligned psychics who want to bring about an age of order in this world, and who are doing this in secrecy by pulling the strings in the background, by unleashing the theocracy as their first move, but naturally they're going to try to influence other parts of the world, where I figured with everything that we know about the characters of Drengur and Hjalmar so far, Hjalmar seems like a pretty natural object for them to latch onto, and that's sort of giving me the vibe that Hjalmar is not particularly pleased with the nature of how the Northern Raiders are generally doing business, and that he's had for some time now a new advisor who has set him on the path of perhaps even confrontation against his father, who isn't amenable to the whispering of the Silent Council, and whom they are hoping, for the moment at least, to have the best shot at replacing him with Hjalmar, until perhaps a better target comes along. So on that longship, besides Hjalmar and the crew, we have this diminutive psychic advisor, perhaps a talented mind reader who can, under the guise of some more civilized methods, pull Hjalmar's strings in the background. Now, one thing that we don't currently know besides the fact that Hjalmar has been exiled and that he has this advisor is what is he actually going to do next? What is his plan? Is he simply resigned to exile and continuing on as a mercenary? I'd say that's a confident no without even rolling for it. I'm sure that Hjalmar is trying to use the counsel of his silent counselor to make some kind of a triumphant return to the land of the Northern Raiders. So how is he gonna go about this? What is his plan and what is the advice that he gets from the advisor? I think that's something we should figure out before we have Hjalmar and Oksana meet and interact, since this will inform a lot of how Hjalmar sees Oksana and her potential usefulness as either a tool or an obstacle or someone to first assess and then decide. Which means we should probably dig out the oracles again, and I think that is something where we could probably go about it in a number of ways. We could give ourselves a subject and a theme again, or we could use our regional oracles and figure out, okay, by way of which ploy in which area of the world is he trying to gather allies, find some magical item, more powerful sorcery or whatever he's trying to do to get back either in the good graces of his father or to get back with enough force to overthrow his father. So I think before I do subject and theme, I want to do a region and an event in that region to figure out what he's trying to chase down now, besides mercenary work to pay the bills and feed the troops. I think his next step is going to be aimed at furthering his overarching plan. So what region is he targeting? That's a die 6 and a die 8. 5 and 5, the last city of a dying species. That is what I was actually hoping for. That is super interesting because I have no clue what this could be, but it sounds like a great setup for a heist or selling your soul to something or recruiting some otherworldly army. There's all kinds of possibilities. So let's find the last city of a dying species here in the book, and then we'll roll a die 6 for the adventure hook and see by way of what rumor Hjalmar is trying to reach his next milestone. 1. The city's heart is dying. It must be replaced by the heart of a leviathan, or everything will crumble to dust. Hunting parties are sent throughout the world, none have returned yet. Okay. We're assuming these are hunting parties sent throughout the world initially from the dying species, yes? So perhaps Hjalmar, having encountered one such, knows about the leviathan heart requirement and figures that this is his way of forging an alliance with this dying species, who are, I think, even like pretty remarkably close to the Northern Raiders. Like, they're effectively neighbors. So there's also probably some history there, some history of conflict and raids and uneasiness between the two, where maybe Hjalmar can find an open ear with his new age of civilized raiders approach, which makes me think that he's probably going to go leviathan hunting, and that's his next thing that he wants to do. In which case, if he's an opportunist, maybe the presence of another ship, mid-sized kind of vessel with 2 capable warriors and a bunch of crew and a capable captain is sort of an opportunity there. So let's keep it in mind as we release the Hjalmar now into our scene, which plays out as the day in Decimation progresses from a midday drinks with 2 of the Northern Raiders to an ever-growing circle of them joining at this impromptu getting to know each other party under this half-improvised tavern lean-to that they're currently celebrating under. And as Oksana and Ginahar are sitting there talking to their 2 acquaintances and making the acquaintance of more and more of the raiders, before long the captain appears. Walking with an almost studied grace and rarely lifting the hand from the pommel of his sword, Hjalmar saunters over towards the table where these two striking yet unfamiliar people are sitting. This Dust Empire nomad pit fighter with the bald head, the many scars, the cauliflower ear, and this other one who might even look a little bit strikingly familiar. Now here's a question: how alike do Oksana and Hjalmar look through their shared parentage, even though they're only half-siblings? Is there enough of a striking similarity that Hjalmar at least has a moment of, what am I looking at? I'm gonna call that unlikely, so I'm gonna roll 2 dice and pick the lowest. Hell no. Okay, so they look quite different, which leads me to believe that they have mothers of very, very different ancestry, and therefore there is no real sibling similarity going on there. And let's not forget, of course, as he wanders over, at his elbow, never far from his side, is the advisor, this wizened, half-sized, really only reaching a little higher than Hjalmar's hip, shaven-headed, except for this intricately woven braid, seemingly old-looking, but at the same time strangely childlike featured person with an unreadable mask of a face, but very keen, piercing, milky white eyes that settle on everyone unfamiliar, a little bit too uncomfortably long, almost as if thoughts are being pried from the inside of their skulls. And before he approaches the table where the group is now sitting and where Oksana and Ginaha, noticing him approaching, are kind of occasionally glancing over in his direction, Hjalmar gets a little tug at his elbow and, being fairly used to this, is bending low and getting an earful of advice from his chief advisor.
Ah, now what have we here? New acquaintances. Care to introduce me?
And the two initial acquaintances that Oksana and Ginaha made handle the introduction, and after a little bit of a back and forth of, well, what passes for small talk, effectively regarding, hey, have a look at that ship over there and how they stole it, etc., the matter, of course, turns to the question at hand, which the raiders told Oksana and Ginaha that Hjalmar can help them with. And Hjalmar, for the moment, is playing the helpful, jovial role and trying to suss out who he's dealing with here and how he can use them properly. So he's going to be helpful.
A clan tattoo, you say? Well, might I have a look?
And I think I'm going to do a little bit of a wisdom check for Oksana here to see if she can read the reaction on Hjalmar's face as he sees this iconograph. That is a no, she cannot. So we interpret this as Hjalmar keeps his face carefully blank and simply looks at it and tilts his head a little bit to one side, then to the other, and is about to speak when there is another little tug on the elbow and he bends down again, only perhaps to the consternation of Oksana and Ginaha, because the rest of the crew is quite used to this. And there is a mumbled string of words flowing into his ear that is fairly impossible to overhear, but not entirely impossible. So I guess we'll make a disadvantaged check to overhear this. Maybe we can actually figure out what is being said. But how do we do this? Is this intelligence? Is this wisdom? What is this? I feel like the closest is perhaps intelligence, where you can combine it with sort of a filtering out of background noise and also maybe catching a glimpse of the lips moving as far as you can see it. So we'll go with intelligence for a change, because we've been rolling wisdom a whole lot, much to our disadvantage here. Speaking of which, we'll roll intelligence with disadvantage, so 2 dice, and we'll pick the worst result. We'll have to roll under Oksana's intelligence of 12, which also happens to be Genaha's intelligence of 12, so either of the two can potentially figure it out. And while they perhaps don't get the complete meaning of the phrase that is being spoken to Hjalmar at the moment, both Oksana and Genaha pick up on perhaps a slip of a hand where the advisor momentarily fails to obscure her lips properly, and they get a read on this rather ominous message, which is, "This is a design that I have seen in your father's thoughts and dreams many times," which is obviously conveyed in a more of an inaudible whisper, but they get the gist of it. And again, now Hjalmar reacts, or maybe he doesn't. We'll roll wisdom again. Just missing it, but Hjalmar keeps the composure and perhaps simply turns back to Oksana and regards her thoughtfully. "Yes, this is rather familiar looking design. How did you come about this?" And I think now we have a bit of a quid pro quo situation where Oksana is trying to not give too much away, while Hjalmar, of course, wants to know everything, so we'll have a bit of a verbal back and forth here. But unless she wants to outright lie, which I don't think she wants to, Oksana will have to at least reveal the one fundamental fact first, which is, "It was my mother's, and she always claimed that the day my father returned I would get my own." And Hjalmar absorbs this information and wonders, "And did that day ever come? That you got your own?" "It might happen yet, but not for sitting in Tarentus and waiting, so I figured I'd move myself towards it instead." And again there is this tugging of the elbow, and again we're trying to read what is being said. And again we succeed. Oh my god. Okay. So this time around, smiling, Hjalmar holds up a hand and bends down again and gets this message whispered into his ear, which is, "This one is looking for her father, and it is one that the two of you share." And naturally, I think Hjalmar already suspected this, just purely based on the design and a little bit of information that's been provided, but now it is, of course, up to Oksana not to react. I think we're going to roll a charisma roll to keep her face carefully blank now. And that is close, but that is a success again, because charisma 13 is quite high. And Hjalmar straightens himself up again, and his smile widens, and he holds out his arms and says, "Well, what good fortune unites us here today, for I can most definitely help you in your quest to find your father, sister." And I think there's like a moment of quiet disbelief, just a split second, where the raiders are also the surrounding crew of Hjalmar are searching his face for his reaction, and seeing this genuine looking smile just rise up in a cheer. And Oksana, also being quite the good actress and quite the competent socialite, is going to act overjoyed, and there's going to be a brief sibling embrace between the two of them, and Genaha perhaps being a bit more reserved, looking at this quite irritated from the sidelines. And now, of course, the party's on, and a keg comes out, and a whole bunch of shenanigans ensues, but we also assume that Genaha, Oksana, and Hjalmar, sitting together, are having a bit of a more intense conversation now. And perhaps even one specifically where Hjalmar is trying to figure out exactly the sequence of events. Because I think for the moment he maybe assumes that Oksana is kind of one of his father's byblows, although he's not known for this kind of thing. He's not known for having like an army of bastards out in the world. And what of course irritates him greatly is this tattoo design, which is much more of a commitment and much more worrying to Hjalmar in its implications. So Hjalmar is trying to suss out from Oksana what she knows about the Northern Raiders and where she also effectively stands theoretically in a line of succession. Now, one thing we should make clear first is how does succession even work on the Northern Raider side? It seems to be a bit more of a influx kind of culture, but I think for our story it would be nice if some kind of a blood primogeniture succession was at least a factor, where this jarldom of a certain area of maybe one fjord and a half or something, and then maybe you unite a couple of families around you and you're like governing a certain region. This kind of thing is handed down by appointment of the previous office holder, but there is an incredibly large chance, fueled by all kinds of traditions and superstitions, that it goes to the firstborn. So I'm going to call this likely and ask, is this impression that I have of the Northern Raider culture correct? Well, that's double sixes, which gives it a little bit of a twist still. How? What can we do with this? Like, does this mean it absolutely has to go to the oldest? There's no two ways about it. It's not actually by appointment. It's always long-standing oldest primogeniture right. And as soon as she shows up on the playing field, Oksana is effectively immediately the designated heiress. I don't know if that adds anything. So maybe there is something else at play here. I can't really think of any good twists here right now to pump this up even further. If you can, leave me a comment. The one thing I'm going to take away from it now, for now, is that there is definitely primogeniture, and Oksana's existence is a problem for Hjalmar, which he, of course, is not going to let on at all, because as crafty as he is, he's going to do what a good backstabber does, is keep your friends close but your enemies closer, trying to learn about Oksana, trying to suss her out, and trying to then either use her or dispose of her in a scenario where it can't fall back on him, because right now there are way too many eyes and it's just been revealed that they're siblings, so if she now keels over dead, that's a bit much for probably even his loyal crew. Now, I think with regards to the outlying situation here of Hjalmar trying to probe Oksana for information, figuring out that she's older and that she's a problem, we'll roll a disadvantaged intelligence check for Oksana to see how much he gives away inadvertently, and I'll put it as a disadvantage because she knows next to nothing about the Northern Raiders, while Hjalmar knows pretty much everything, so he can very easily mislead or steer the conversation, especially since he's got this mind-reading advisor who will occasionally butt in and provide some whispered words of guidance. So disadvantaged intelligence check it is. And successful. I think what this means is that Hjalmar comes away from this conversation with a fairly decent impression that Oksana is legitimate, but he's not quite sure about the timeline, and asking Oksana how old she is will reveal that she doesn't know how old she is, because her mother never told her. So Hjalmar at the moment isn't clear whether this is someone ahead of him in the line of succession or behind, in which case if it's behind, it's probably a good ally to cultivate. If it's ahead, it's probably at least someone where you should know the strengths and weaknesses. So now is the question, what can Oksana glean from Hjalmar? I think I'm going to do like a regular charisma check for Oksana to see if she can suss out some information from him regarding the rebellion, the relationship with the father, because she already knows that he rose up in rebellion and presumably against their own father. So she's going to get his side of the story regarding the rebellion. And that's quite the failure, so she gets maybe bamboozled a little with the picture painted of the father, where Hjalmar gleans that this abandonment happened and plays that up a little and paints the father, this Drengur, as a faithless, doddering old man who is losing his grip and making the Northern Raiders weak in a time when the world is descending to war, and that he just had the best for his people in mind and was trying to unite them. And then through old ties and a network of equally foolish old jarls up there, they kicked him out, and now they're at peril, and he desperately wants to go back and unite. And of course then he does this somewhat cliched thing where he offers, "Why don't you join me?" to Oksana, trying to kind of establish himself in this leadership position. And considering that he has the 2 longships and the crew and everything, and even though Oksana technically has Heinrich still there saying, "I want to accompany you," I feel like there is a decent chance that she considers that this is a possibility to get something out of her heritage. So get in good with this guy, and maybe we can go up against this abandoning father who is kind of a bit of a son of a bitch now, considering that the picture that was painted is maybe even in line with Oksana's expectations of how Drengur actually is, even though that's not how he actually is. And there's gonna be a little bit of a conference between Heinrich, Genaha, and Oksana. And let's see now, how does Heinrich feel about this? Is he inclined to take a little detour and join his forces to whatever ploy Hjalmar is after? Because his alternative plan was almost equally insane, to just go off and find the Gold City somewhere. So let's see. It's not particularly likely or unlikely. So is Heinrich on board with this throwing in the lot and this stolen ship with Hjalmar's cause? Yes, he's on board. Genaha, on the other hand, I think is reluctant and resistant, and I think I want to even figure out before anything else, with an unlikely role, does Genaha, perhaps even from her pit fighting days up north, does she know anything or remember anything about Hjalmar? Has he maybe watched her fight or something like that? It's unlikely, so let's see. Okay, hell yes cancelled out by hell no, so no. I think Hjalmar is not a pit fighting connoisseur, and that probably also tracks with his civilized predilections. But I think Genaha isn't thrilled about this idea, and will have Oksana try to sweet talk her into it with charisma. Which she does, and begrudgingly Genaha accedes that they don't really have a better option, because if it is as Hjalmar says it is, that Drengur is this type of guy, then just showing up there and going, "I'm your long lost daughter," isn't gonna accomplish much. So now they're more on mission, 2 siblings together after their birthright, and divide and conquer, and we'll figure it out afterwards once the old man is out of the picture and Heinrich is on board, and they have 2 longships now and that ship, at which point they enter into this discussion of, well, now it's time for our next step in the plan to work, to go Leviathan hunting. At which point Heinrich probably has the face of regret creeping over him, turning into the picture of what the hell have I gotten myself into. But I think this is where Hjalmar shines. We imagine him as kind of an inspiring leader, even though he has a bit of a different style from the, Captain Firebrand type persona, but he can lay out a plan and make it make sense to you, and then you'll buy in, and it's the best idea for the moment. So he lays out this encounter with the hunting party from the last City of a Dying Species, where perhaps they found a survivor shipwrecked after an encounter with a Leviathan that went south and got the story out of them before they passed on. And they know that the city needs a Leviathan heart, because otherwise the city's heart will fail and the city will sink beneath the waves. And Hjalmar also knows from their shared history that there is potential there to raise an army, to find allies, to access mighty sorceries, whatever it is, to help them overthrow Drengur, and convinces them that this is our best option. And so the next day they load up the longships. They reprovision the captured Theocracy vessel, and with the earnings from their previous mercenary contract now almost depleted, this is the shot they have. They go out into the open sea to find and hunt a Leviathan. And that's where we're gonna pick it up next time. So thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you then, and bye for now.